So we've learned about the source monitor and how to bring those clips down onto the timeline. We've learned about the project. Oh, let's make this smaller. This is just really hurting my eyes. Yeah, let's keep it as that. I actually live like this, but let's just leave it like this because it looks prettier and it looks much more professional, doesn't it? So we've learned about clips and scrubbing through them and finding where in a clip we want. Okay? So we now need to understand the timeline. First off, this is really quite important. You need to make sure that the things here that I have checked are checked for you. They should be on by default. This is snapping. That needs to stay on. There are times where it can come off, and I will show you instances where it may be easier not to have snapping on, and I'll explain when snapping is working at first so you can see what I mean. We need to leave this on as well. Insert and overwrite sequences as nests or individual clips. I'm not going to deep dive into what that actually means, purely because I always have it on and it works for me in my workflow. And whether you like it or not, you're learning my workflow. It works for me, and it's worked for, well, it's been developed by me over 10 years. We leave this on as well, linked selection. Add marker is something that, as you can see, there's M there. So we never use that because I use the keyboard shortcut. And this is handy. It's useful, and it's actually a setting. It's not toggleable on and off. Toggleable? Pretty sure that's a word. You don't toggle this on and off. It's something else in here, which I will get to when we're talking about workspaces even further down the line. Yes, we still have things to talk about with regards to the workspaces. Remember, these are all the workspaces. You'll have less than me, but yes, there are other workspaces that we need to work into once we start really deep diving into the edit. But first steps first. So what we want to talk about in this section is video tracks and layering. And actually discussing the video tracks will have some similarities with the audio tracks, but one big thing will be more obvious than others, which is why it's not anything like the audio track. And that is what we're talking about at the end of the last section. There is one program monitor. There is one video shown at any one time. So what is layering? Well, if you've ever worked in any kind of image editing, you'll understand layers. If you've ever worked with Photoshop or Illustrator, the thing that's on top, the thing that is closest to you is what's seen. The thing that is not very descriptive, but for want of a better word, everything that's behind the front layer is behind it. And if it's smaller than the front layer, it's behind and unseen. That's the same with the video tracks, but instead of front and back, it's top and bottom. So here's video track 3, video track 2, and video track 1. We can always add more video tracks. If you go to anywhere within this space and right click, you can add a track or add tracks. So you don't have to just add one at a time. You can add multiple. You can also delete tracks, but you can also create tracks without having to do that by just dragging up, and Premiere Pro will create another track. I'll show you that when we get to that point. So here we are with our clips, and we've cleared our sequence out again. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag in this clip to here, and I don't want the audio. So just to recap, I've set an in point and an out point. I'm just going to drag the video and put that onto track 1. Because the playhead is at the beginning, it's shown it up on the program monitor. If the playhead was here, it's not reading anything because the clip isn't there. So it's back to nothing, black video. But it's not black video, it's just nothing, because you can actually import black video. I've never done that, but Adobe gives you the option to. Still don't know why after 10 years. So here, right at the beginning, I dragged my playhead right to the back, and that is where we're starting. Now, we have all this space here, and yet only this little clip. So let's have this clip fill more of the space, not making it bigger, Control and Z, but just to zoom in a bit. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this, and there are actually 3 ways to zoom in this timeline. We have the width, we have the height of the video tracks, and we also have the height of the audio tracks. Now you can do that with these handles. You can actually, you see how this handle is here and this handle is here? Where have we seen that before? Well, we've seen that before when we were something like this in the source monitor when we interpreted the footage. Do you remember that? Well, that's exactly the same representation here, because the timeline has defaulted to be just over 10 minutes long. In fact, if we take our playhead, remember we hit home to go to the beginning. Well, if you have the end key, it may be a function modifier and an end key if you're on a laptop, but if you have the end key and hit that, that goes not to the end, but to the end of what you have in the timeline. So don't confuse the end for the end of the timeline. If you hit end, it only goes to the end of the last clip you have, whether it be a video, an image, or some kind of audio. You can't get to the end by shortcutting. If you drag the playhead, however, you get right to the end, and there's actually 10 minutes, 4 seconds, and 18 frames. Not too sure why it defaults as that. I'm pretty sure there's some kind of maths in there, but yeah, that's where we're at. Bearing in mind, just to touch over this, hours, minutes, seconds, frames. How do we know that that is absolutely frames? Well, let's go back to the beginning and let's play this bit of video with the spacebar. While we're in here, you can see how there's a little blue highlight around this window, the timeline window. If I was in here, if this was selected and I pressed the spacebar, it would play up there. But we're down here, click in here, and the blue signifier around here means that this is where any of our shortcuts, our keyboard shortcuts, will affect. One of those keyboard shortcuts is spacebar. So we're going to hit that and watch this clock. See how it didn't get to 60? So that's not seconds. It's not even hundredths of a second. It goes to 24. Why 24? Well, because there's 25 frames per second in our sequence. So if you go one more, it goes to 1 second. The way in which you go forward and back 1 frame is actually the cursor on your keyboard, left and right. So you can actually go back and forth just by each frame. Now, do you see how this right here isn't in focus? It's blurred. Remember what we talked about very early on with your hand moving quickly in front of your face and that creating blur? Well, there's motion blur here too. That's because it was filmed with the 180-degree rule. I'm not going to go too much into that. In fact, I'm not going to go any more into that because that's more videography rather than editing. But if that kind of tweaks your interest, have a search for the 180-degree camera rule or video rule, and that will explain how you get motion blur or how you absolutely guarantee a natural motion blur in footage. So yeah, even if we're going frame by frame and we're stopped, there will still be blur here, and that's because of motion blur. But back to here, we're down here on the timeline and we want to see more of it. We've dragged this all the way out. We can see far too much, and the clip that we have now is tiny. Okay, well, leaving that handle there, grabbing this handle here and pulling back to the left will zoom in. You actually have the clip now going off the timeline. You can't see all of the clip. Move that back. Brilliant. The shortcut for this is, if you're on a trackpad, it will be your 2 fingers or whatever it is to scroll. Control and save. The autosave does save, by the way. I'm just making sure to bake it into the project file in the folder. But what we're looking for if you've got a keyboard and a mouse, we're using the scroll wheel on the mouse. If you don't have a scroll wheel, it's whatever affects the scroll wheel. On a lot of trackpads on laptops, it's 2-finger up or down. So if we hold down the Alt key, which is the Option on a Mac, I've remembered it once. Don't expect me to remember it all the time. It's the key immediately to the left of your spacebar. So holding the Alt key and scrolling down will zoom out. Holding the Alt key and scrolling up will zoom in. And where it zooms into depends on where your mouse is. So if I place my mouse over here and I zoom in, you see how it grows out from where my mouse is. Again, if I go all the way over here and I zoom out, it retreats back to where my mouse is. It's something that you will get used to, and it will become second nature. I also have a mouse which has a thumb wheel on it, and I use that to go back and forth, up and down the timeline. But you can do that with your scroll wheel or your trackpad by not holding Alt and just scrolling down. I just use the thumb because it makes sure that I'm actually moving and manipulating the timeline in the way that I want to. So I'm scrolling down now on the wheel, which you would be going either down or up on your trackpad. And as you can see from here and the numbers, I'm going all the way down the timeline. Scroll up and I'm coming back. The quicker way to do that, if I was all the way down here, would be to hold down Alt, zoom out, and then get your mouse over here and zoom in, and you move your way around. Now there is a keyboard shortcut to show all of the timeline, and it depends where it is on your keyboard, but on my keyboard it's to the left of Z, and that is the / key. Let me zoom all the way in, and I'm using that key just to the left of Z, and I press that and it shows everything that's in the timeline. Not the whole timeline, but it zooms out to where all of the footage that I've got is in frame. The reason why I'm telling you this is because I never use this key. And the reason why I'm telling you that I never use this key is because I change the effect that key has. It's my number one shortcut. We're not there yet, but if you find that useful, when we set our keyboard shortcuts, you're going to need to find a different key. As I said, this is so customizable, and although I can show you a certain way to do it and to manipulate the footage, manipulate the program, and to work with the program, it is inevitably you that will decide exactly what you want to be able to do with the footage and what signifiers, what shortcuts, what workflow that you want. There's no hard and fast rule here. It's just the way it is. So now we have a video on video track 1. Let's see what happens when we put a video onto video track 2. First off, let's get the playhead and get it right back to the beginning of the sequence, which on the keyboard is home. And let's go into track 2. Double click. And there we have the video already represented where my mouse was when I clicked of footage. I'm going to pull it back a little bit, and okay, we've got my father-in-law. This is Joey, by the way. We've got my father-in-law who's just lit the fire. Let's bring it back a little bit. And I want to go in there. And I want to go out there. So that's I for in, O for out. Now I just want the video again, and I'm just going to drag this in. So let's see what happens when I drag it in. Okay, so I have a representation of this clip. In fact, let me just zoom out a little bit. Alt or Option on the keyboard and scroll down. And now let's drag it in. It's a little bit longer. If I bump this right up to the end, it's a little bit longer than the other clip. Now let me show you snapping first while we're here. If you look here, when I bring this clip in, look around here and you'll see, I want the video. You see that there's a small little arrow just below my mouse cursor here. See how it's disappeared? That's saying I want to snap. And that's trying to snap to two things. In this instance, it's two things. It's trying to snap to the beginning because I've got pretty close to the beginning of the timeline. It's also, you see how at the top, there's one of those arrows as well. So it's trying to snap to the beginning. It's also trying to snap to the beginning of the other clip. So still holding my left mouse button, if I drag this over and get towards the end of the first clip, now we have that black line and we have that arrow. You see the arrow that's coming right here? Look at the corner right here. That's now confirming that that black line intersects right at the end of the other clip. Now I could drop this onto track 1, video track 1, just by letting go of the mouse while that clip is in that space. So now we have two clips, on video track 1. And if I scrub through, nice, easy cut. Very similar to what we did up here with in and out and comma to automatically put it down. Now what happens if I'm halfway through this clip, just by moving the playhead, and I grab this clip, the second clip, and bring it onto video track 2, and let go? Well, I can't see video track 1 now. Remember, it's top to bottom. So rather than front to back in image editing software, we're looking from top to bottom. So if you imagine you're stood here looking straight down like a plan view, the only thing you can see is this clip because it's the same size or bigger than the clip below. How do I prove that to you? Well, if I go to effects controls, don't remember this, we are going to be talking about this, but here's the scale of the video. And if I scale this down, the other clip is behind. And if I play them, if I take the playhead right back to the beginning and press spacebar, they're both playing at the same time. They're both in the same time within the video, within the timeline. But because they're at the same time, they're playing consequently together. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I think it does. So everything that's above takes precedence. So if you've got something on top of a track below that is taking up the full screen, it will cover everything that's below. Why would you want to do this? Well, let's say that this is not this video, but it's something else. In fact, do you remember the project that we were looking at before, the actual review video I made for my channel with this? Let's bring that back. And now you've got your eye in with regards to video 1 and video 2 and the different tracks. Let's see if you can notice why I've done what I've done. Okay, so here we are. We're in the timeline. I'm zooming out and moving around so you can see everything. And I'm hoping that this is a little bit more clearer than the last time we saw this piece of editing. Now, first and foremost, let me just quickly draw your eye to over here. Remember that we were bringing in different folders? Well, here is an example of that. So the video, within the video, we had the A7 III, we have the A6300, and we have other B-roll. There's the cooking, remember? And the dough, and the tomato sauce. You see how much is in here. However, when we twirl it all back down, it's all nice and neat. It makes such a difference. I've actually got 2 projects open at the moment because still we have these videos, and along the top we still have our sequence right here because the sequences can tab all the way along. This can really help, or it can really confuse depending on what's happened and if you've done something blindly and not thought about it. This is the most important reason why we keep our sequences where they are. Because let's say this Char Outdoors #1 review, this is the make of the pizza oven. If I close that sequence, how do I get it back? Well, if I go into sequences, it's right there. If that was somewhere in here, I'd have had to search for SEQ, and it could have been in any host of bins. But here it is right here. And if I double click on it, straight in. Now, if I'd selected it and double clicked, remember what happens? It wants me to rename the file, which is why I clicked off it and then double clicked on it. So let me show you what I mean with regards to the layering and why you would want to put different layers on the same thing. You want to override, you want to override the video that's being shown. Well, here I'm talking, that's a lovely, lovely frame. And I'm talking about here, which is my wife cutting and making the tomato sauce. As I'll say in the video, we very quickly discovered that there was a better way to do it, but I got the footage, so I'm getting it. But have a look while we're playing back. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Remember, hold down the Alt or Option on a Mac, and you can see that we have this video track, which is on track 1, which is me talking. Another lovely freeze frame, Adam. Then we have the B-roll on here, followed by another piece of B-roll on here, and continued B-roll, and then somewhere where it's not B-roll. Let's see what that translates to on the one video screen that we have. I'm going to unmute this. You're going to continue to hear my voice. Sorry about that. But let's just see it in practice and why we would layer video on top of video.
It's up and ready to go. Emma, my legend of a wife, set off prepping what we needed for the pizzas. First, the tomato sauce, and although we've since found a stupidly easy recipe that requires no cooking at all, we filmed her making the tomato sauce recipe on the Char Outdoors website, so we're damn well going to use some of that footage. That said, the pizzas tasted amazing, and that tomato sauce. Then, the day before we were due to cook, she started making...
You see what's just happened there? I brought myself back, but then went back to here. Because this is the beauty of B-roll. B-roll, if I didn't have this B-roll, I'm going to deselect or hide. Hide? Yeah, hide this video track. So I'm going to go back to where we were, and I'm going to see this little eye here. I'm going to toggle the track output. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm not deleting anything, I'm just turning it off. I'm also going to turn off track 3, which is up here. There's no actual reason why that's up on track 3, but it was while I was building and I had other stuff that was around, and I just placed it on top, and I realized, yeah, okay, I don't need anything else. So I just deleted it, but it stayed up on track 3. So I'm actually going to remove track 3 as well. And let's just very briefly watch that back and see the difference. Save project, thank you.
Up and ready to go. Emma, my legend of a wife, set off prepping what we needed for the pizzas. First, the tomato sauce, and although we've since found a stupidly easy recipe that requires no cooking at all, we filmed her making the tomato sauce recipe on the Char Outdoors website.
It's just a talking head. And doesn't matter how pretty, or in this case, unpretty you are, it's boring, which is where B-roll comes in. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to cut up this, because we can then move things around. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I think this is a really good illustration. Let's say this piece of footage here, let's toggle back on those tracks. This piece of footage here, we came along, and let me mute him. We came to that point where we were like, right, okay, let's bring in that tomato sauce. So I brought it in, and rather than actually putting it on track 2, I put it on track 1. Okay, so okay, that's cool. I then come back there, and that's great. But right, okay, let's decide that I then want to move that, and I want to move it over to here. So if we're now playing back,
off prepping what we needed for the pizzas. First, the tomato sauce, and although we've since found a...
See what happened? This has overwritten what was on video track 1. Now, do you remember what your number 1 shortcut is? Undo. That's only gone 1. Undo again. Control and Z. Brilliant. We've lifted it up. So then we're back here, because we can easily move that along there where we were intending it to be on video track 1, but we still have all the main video underneath for us, so we're not overwriting everything. Play again.
Off prepping what we needed for the pizzas. First, the tomato sauce, and although we've since...
So it's back. That's why we layer on top for video. It just helps us, and it doesn't make the decisions final. If this was here, remember, Alt or Option and scroll up or scroll down, and it was in here, and then we wanted to move around here, it's a pain. It can be rectified, and I will show you how to, but it can be rectified like that, but that's too many clicks. And if you start moving the video around, it can be really difficult to repair a hole that you've punched in the video when you didn't really need to do it initially. Just stay on a different video track. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So that's how why we use video tracks and tracks in general. With audio, it's a little bit different. Nothing overwrites anything because nothing's seen. Everything is to do with audio levels or effects that you're applying to certain tracks or certain clips. And that's why you would have different audio tracks. With regards to video, it dictates what's being shown on the screen, and that is key. So that is video layers and how it affects your timeline. Let me save that project, always save that project, and just close that project right now. So we're back to here. So again, let's see, we were moving this around on video track 2. If we then move that down and then think, oh no, we actually want to move it a little bit further along, it's overwritten here. We can drag this out to bring it back, but it would have been so much easier just to drag it on track 2. Now, you can keep on going. So let's say we move this up to track 3. Track 3 is already there. Remember when I said you could right click and add track? Well, if we just drag it up into the empty space and let go, it's already created track 4. And we can create track 5 and track 6 and so on. And if we keep going up, we can't go any further. Is it limited? No. But if we hold down Shift and zoom, see how we're shrinking this way rather than just Alt and this way. If we use Alt, it will resize one track. I never really want to do that. I always want to do them all together. So you hold down Shift and it sizes them all vertically. But we can still keep going. See? But then very soon you've got very thin video clips and you can't see what's on it. You've got to then zoom in to be able to see what's on it, and there we go, it's there right at the beginning. So what we like to do is try and at least minimize how many video tracks we use, but using more than one video track can really help you to get the effect you want without baking in your decision and without almost destructively editing. We don't want to edit destructively. This is non-destructive. It's just overlapping. We can move this around. Whereas if it was here and we moved it around and then come back, it's destructed that. It's destroyed that. It's destructively edited. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. We're back here. That is video layering. Next section, we're going to be discussing shortcuts and how they help you in your editing process. I've been waiting to get to this point. I have some great shortcuts that I use that really help your workflow. You're probably nowhere near as excited as I am, but shortcuts are the life of an editor.